All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Sorry for the delay. We're a little bit late here today than normal. We're doing a new system for broadcasting and had a couple things to figure out. So hopefully this is all working well. Today we're not only streaming live to Facebook, but hopefully also to YouTube and to Twitch. So awesome. So thank you for joining us. This is our regular interview series that we do throughout the year. We do this every single Sunday at 4 o'clock, and then we also have a performance. And today we have my good friend, great bassist and educator and composer, Greg Feingold, to discuss his career and life in music. So on the beginning of this post, there should be a bit of a bio about Greg and where he went to school and who he's performed with. So there's lots of great artists on there. We'll talk about that a little bit. And if you have questions for Greg or myself during the interview, feel free to dive in and send us a comment, and we'll try to do our best to either get to them during the broadcast or after the fact as well. So, Greg, for viewers that don't know anything about you, can you talk about your musical upbringing? How did you get started playing music?
Well, I started off playing piano when I was 5, although I hide it from you usually.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
Chicago. The first suburb west in Oak Park, River Forest to be specific, but nobody's ever heard of that. So I started playing piano when I was 5, bass when I was 10, and I've had ridiculously good teachers on both instruments since then. When I had a choice to go for high school, I opted to go to the Chicago Academy for the Arts. So school was 8:30 to 1:30, and then 1:30 to 4:30 was just specifically music for me. Followed by Berklee College of Music. And then I split my time as an accompanist there after school while I lived in New York. So I worked 2 days a week in Boston and then had an apartment in New York for a while, and then moved there full time, and then decided I was done and kind of showed up here, rebuilt my life here.
Okay, well, we're kind of light speeding through this stuff here. I have questions about more of the beginning stuff. So you said you started on piano. Did you come from a musical family? Did anyone else in your family play?
Kind of. My parents sing and play guitar as like a couples night on Saturday nights. They've done that for the last 30 years. It's kind of cool. It's been their thing. So I grew up listening to them play, and my brother plays guitar too. So when we got old enough, we played on Saturday nights together, but that's kind of the extent of it. My brother's in sales. My dad is an inventor, and my mom is the head of fundraising for an arts organization, which you knew.
Okay. All right. Well, so when you were, you started music, you said at 4, you started on piano?
5. Yeah.
5. Okay. So in elementary school or middle school, were you involved with music?
Yeah. 4th grade was when I started bass. So I was in orchestra and jazz band from 4th through 8th grade. Did all the normal competition stuff and concerts twice a year. And little me, I think, had a ponytail by the time I was done with that. But yeah.
Well, so when did you start? Did you have private instruction on bass at a very young age?
Yeah. The minute I got my school bass, I had 30 minutes on upright bass and 30 minutes on electric. My teacher was nice enough to split those.
Well, so and when, because everybody kind of becomes, everyone enjoys music, particularly if I think you're a musician, you enjoy music at some level. And being in Chicago, I mean, Chicago's had a history of a great music scene for many, 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 many years. When did you start being aware of like the music scene of Chicago, and did your instructor kind of direct you that way, or how did that come about?
Yeah. My second teacher, who was like my main influence, gave my parents the information that Dave Harland was in town at, where was Dave playing? At the Jazz Showcase. And I fought this like tooth and nail. Like I really didn't want to go to this concert. My parents forced me to go and introduced me to Dave after the concert, and I was kind of hooked ever since. And then you couldn't stop me from going out and visiting all these places and stuff.
Interesting. Well, so prior to that, like when you were really young and started to play, what were some like styles of music and musicians or bands that kind of piqued your interest?
I listened to a lot of folk music growing up just because that's what I heard. Crosby, Stills and Nash, John Prine, random things that my parents listened to. I was a fan of like whatever was on the radio, like you were when you were in 6th grade. So Lifehouse, Sum 41, a bunch of random things like that.
Different than when I was in 6th grade, but
A little, yeah. Yeah. And then from there, I got into Dave Harland, and then jazz kind of exploded in my life after that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Before the Dave Harland concert, were you aware of jazz or other jazz bassists or any artists? Or?
It was on my radar, but everything was still kind of conceptual. Like everything was just for my private lessons, and I had no context as to like why anything was important. And then that kind of all put everything together.
So it's safe to say then Dave Harland was probably one of your first inspirations for like, bass or jazz bass, I should say.
Probably the first, yeah. Followed shortly by Ray Brown.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask. So other early influences on your instrument would be Dave and Ray Brown, and whom else? Ray
Brown, Paul Chambers. I think my first ever transcription was Sam Jones on Autumn Leaves from something else. Yeah. Just because that's.
For those who don't know, you're talking about Cannibal Adderley's album, Something Else with Sam Jones. Yeah. Okay, cool. Did you do a lot of, it's been interesting to me interviewing a lot of the older musicians. A lot of the stuff that they did was by ear. I mean, with some transcribing, but a lot of playing by ear and playing along with albums. Mm-hmm. Did you do a lot of that, or was it more write things out and learn that way, or how did you go about learning?
A really, really 50-50 split. I had like I was right on the cusp of like, I Real B came about like when I was in college. No, I know. So like the first 6 or 7 years of playing, like I had nothing and kind of had to figure things out off of recordings. And then I had to read a ton of stuff too. Like I was always having to read music in high school, and Berklee kind of puts a premium on being able to read anything that's in front of you.
And for people that are maybe musicians or don't understand what you're talking about, iReal B or iReal Pro, as it's called now, is an app on your phone that works in the way that you can see the chord changes to songs. So if you don't know a song, you can look it up without having to go through and it sounds awful, do the work on your own. I mean, it's good and bad. It's good and bad. Yeah.
It has a lot of really good applications. It's just not the Bible.
Definitely. Well, they certainly have their own arrangements or lack thereof in there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so you said you had a really good instructor. Who was your first really good instructor's bassist?
The person that's probably responsible for me playing bass past middle school or high school is Jason Patera. He was my private teacher from 7th grade until I graduated from high school. But he was also the head of the music department at the Chicago Academy for the Arts. So he kind of steered me there. And he's now the principal. But he's won a bunch of golden apples and gives a bunch of TED Talks. And he can kind of teach you to do anything. Like it's not really music teaching. It's kind of just learning how to learn. So he kind of put me on the right path to explore whatever I wanted to do.
All right. Well, when you were in middle school or high school still in Chicago, were there any of your bandmates or classmates that are musicians as well or went on to be musicians?
Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Middle school, Lucas Ellman, Kyle Liss. None of them are like radio names or anything, but both of them are still super active in the music community. I think Luke lives in New York now, and Kyle just got a teaching job out in Colorado a couple of years ago and kind of hasn't stopped making music. And then for the Academy, musician-wise, Nick McCree is really active in the Chicago music scene. He plays a lot of gospel and produces worlds of music. He's got perfect tonal recall. So I went to school with a bunch of people like that. Not anybody that's like a household name though. Just all really, really solid
Oh
musicians.
no, that's totally fine. I mean, yeah, you could say that about every scene. Every scene's got great musicians, and there's you hear about maybe like 1%, and there's tons of great guys out there, and women, people, and players, and musicians.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what about you, the high school that you went to in Chicago? Who else was on the faculty at the time teaching?
It was Jesse Langan, who's a classical and Irish guitar teacher. Nick Fryer, who's now in Ohio, I think, something like that. He's a guitar player. Dan Bruce also took over Jason's role as head of the music department when Jason transitioned. Rose Colella taught voice, and then there was just like a string of private lesson teachers.
So growing up in the Chicago area, like for example, we're here in Seattle now, and there's tons of great bassists, and I'm assuming there's probably the same situation there. And bassists are always as you know, a hot commodity because everyone needs a bass player. Particularly good ones that can read and solo and show up on time and all that kind of good stuff. But when you were in middle school or high school, did you start doing performing, gigs with other musicians around town, and was that just like schoolmates or professional gigs, or talk a little bit about that, please?
Let's see here. When did that record come out? I put out 2 records in like my freshman and sophomore year of high school. I think they're both, one of them at least is still on iTunes, with a band called Listen. Kyle Liss was the guy that put it together. I played probably at least 4 or 5 gigs a month from junior year all the way through Berklee.
And was this with your peers, or was this like with other professional musicians, or?
You'd get the occasional call from somebody that you weren't on a first name basis with, but it was mostly just the occasional $25 gig here, or, someone was having a house party that was related to you and show up and isn't that cute, like that kind of thing.
Well, so then you said from like your junior year on, you were doing 4 to 5 gigs a month all the way through your time at Berklee. Okay. All right. So graduate high school, played on the scene around Chicago. And what made you decide to make the decision to go to Berklee?
It was Jason again. He was the local representative for Berklee in Chicago. And I had a choice between a bunch of different schools. I got offers from New School, Berklee, Roosevelt, Northern Illinois. And Berklee just kind of seemed like the right fit.
Why?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Mostly a gut feeling. I had a conversation with the guy I would have been studying with at the New School, who I don't really want to say his name because this doesn't really paint him in a great light. But after my audition, he gave me his number and said if I had any questions to call him, and I did. I had a bunch of different questions, and so I called him, and he picked up the phone, and when I asked if he had a second, his first response was, "Make it quick." I was like, "No, I'm good. I'm out. Can't do that." And then I ruled out Roosevelt and Northern Illinois because they were small and too close to home, honestly. Like I wanted to get out of there.
All right. So you're at Berklee. You've got lots of experience playing already, it sounds like. So was your focus at Berklee performance, jazz performance, composition? What was your focus while you were there?
I was always a performance major. My first semester didn't go super well. I wasn't really playing with people, and I was kind of awkward. Didn't really know how to make friends and set up sessions and get what I wanted out of it. So I went to live in Greece, actually, for my second semester. They had an exchange program where I practiced all the time and kind of built some confidence and put myself in such an awkward situation that anything else was going to make me feel comfortable again. And then I came back and was super focused, and you couldn't really keep me out of the ensemble rooms or the recording studios when I got back. Like the next 3 years, I was always playing.
And was this all, I should have asked earlier, is this all acoustic bass, or were you doing electric as well?
No, it was all acoustic from probably my junior year of high school on. The next time I picked up an electric bass, it was as an accompanist in the voice department. Yeah.
As an aside, I wanted to ask about this because I see many bass players use amps, and I notice you do not, and I've seen other bass players that don't. Why are you making that choice, that decision?
It kind of puts a premium on your sound. Yeah, I like having control of all of the variables. Like if it's not going to sound right, I want it to be my fault. I don't want there to be a bunch of equipment in the way and troubleshooting to do. Like it's going to be something I can adjust. Sounds better. I don't have to carry stuff. There's like a myriad of reasons.
Yeah, well, I like it because we play a lot of shows where they're like, we don't have power, there's no electricity. And it's like, all right, well, we can set up and play anywhere, which is cool. But yeah, I was just curious. A tangent. Well, now since I had no idea about Greece, so I have questions about Greece. So why did you choose Greece to go study and hang out? Was Berklee?
Yeah,
Greece?
It's through what they called the Berklee International Network at the time. So they had schools in Athens and Freiburg, Germany. And almost everybody opted to go to Athens. Honestly, the school looked like fun. They gave you an office. They put you up in a 4-star hotel. It just kind of seemed like a really, really good setup to get a lot of stuff done and see a different part of the world.
Was there much of a jazz scene or a collaborative music scene there?
Yeah. The teacher that I studied with was a very, very serious student of the teacher that I already had, which was my only redeeming quality of my first semester there. So it was like an extension of him, plus the classmates that I went there with were all pretty active in going out and meeting people and playing with Greek musicians.
Well, I've heard 5/4 is like quite a thing over in Athens and Greece. So is your odd meter playing bulletproof at this point?
Oh, bulletproof. That's funny. No. No, it's listening to all that stuff is really cool, but I haven't spent a ton of time working on it. It's usually like 5/8. It's even harder.
All right. Well, so back to Berklee in Boston here. So who were some of the faculty members that you studied with? Because they always have a wonderful group of people teaching there. So who did you study with?
They do. My gold standard was Whit Brown, who was a very good friend of Ray's. No relation whatsoever. But yeah, Whit was my first 2 years there. And then John Lockwood for my second 2. And then there were a bunch of people along the way, like ensemble teachers, but those were my private teachers. I was fortunate to run into and play a lot with Neal Smith, who's a drummer, and he still lives in New York and commutes up 2 days a week. That was kind of the inspiration behind what I was trying to do. Yeah, so he really was a massive booster into my career after Berklee, and through that, got to play with a lot of people. He was the one that put me in touch with Cyrus Chestnut and Winard and all those people.
Well, also we had Max Holmberg on here earlier, and he was talking about his time at Berklee. Yeah, I want to ask about. So you played a lot in Joanne Brackeen's vocal ensemble, or what was it?
No, she led this ungodly rigorous piano class. They did a full transcription every week, and it was like McCoy playing Freedom Jazz Dance, or like
talking about McCoy Tyner, the pianist.
Yeah, or like full Keith Jarrett solos. And every week, all of these kids would sweat bullets and come in and hand us a chart and be like, "Oh God, here we go," and then play like chorus after chorus every single week. It was really cool. And if you didn't do your homework, it was pretty well known that Joanne was going to make you cry. So that was kind of a cool insight into like the level that people expect you to be at.
Right on. So, and you were at Berklee for 3 years, you said. Well, 3 years in the U.S. and I'm sorry, 1 semester in Greece, half a semester in the U.S., half a semester in Greece, and then the last 3 years were in Boston.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, who were some of any of your peers there that I'm sure that went on to become musicians or maybe moved to New York and you played with, or
For sure.
Yeah.
Too many to name. Grace Kelly was there at the time. Mark Whitfield Jr., Davis Whitfield was there. Justin Faulkner. I'm trying to think of people that are still on the scene.
No one's on the scene right now, so go for it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Ricardo Greeley is doing really well. He's got a band with Chris Potter and a bunch of different people. Yeah, those were some of the main people. I'm forgetting piles and piles of these people at this point.
Yeah,
but...
You'll remember them at 1 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
So, and the plan was, at least in your mind at the time from watching your instructors, was to move to New York, live in New York and play, and then maybe come back and teach it and be a part of Berklee, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So then you graduated Berklee,
yep.
And then you moved to New York, and that's...
Yeah. I had played a gig with Winard Harper when I was 19. Neal set me up subbing for his bass player who was out of town. I basically got a call saying, buy a suit, rent a car, get to Jersey, call Winard. So when I graduated, I called him, not really expecting him to pick up. So I left him a message, and must have been 6 minutes later, I got a call back. It's like, Winard Harper, like, okay, here we go. He's going to tell me, like, absolutely not. But his exact words picking up the phone were, do you believe in God? It's like, I do right now. I don't know what to say to that. He was looking through his phone for a bass player. So I went down and did a gig at Moore's Lounge, which paid all of $7. And I joined his band basically from then on. He basically only called me between 2:30 and 5 in the morning because he has kind of weird hours.
And several children, so I can relate to those
Just
hours.
A couple, yeah. I think he goes for a run still between like 3 and 4:30 in the morning. Crazy. But yeah, I worked with him from the day I got there until I actually didn't tell them that I was leaving until like a year after I had moved. Yeah.
Well, so, and you were playing with lots of great musicians in that band. So who else was in the band, like the rotation when you were in the group?
It was kind of in flux. When I got there, it was Jonathan Bichet playing tenor, then a rotating cast of trumpet players. The guy that mainly did it was Randall Haywood. Tata was playing piano through the whole time. Tata Taka Uno. Yeah.
Who was with Roy Hargrove's band for a long stretch.
Mm-hmm. He was a disciple of Hank Jones. Yeah, that was the main cast of characters. Anthony Ware, Christopher McBride, not Christian, Christopher McBride. Charlie Siegler played guitar a lot because he lived around the corner from Winard and they were pretty good friends. Charlie's great. Yeah, that was like the main group that traveled with him.
So when you were in New York, were you able to put anything together to go back and teach in Boston, or you were in New York just playing and gigging? And were you doing any? Answer that question first, please.
Winard kept us really, really busy. We played 3 or 4 nights a week, different places, in every different set of circumstances you could possibly imagine.
Oh, I can.
From
imagine
his
a lot.
mosque to really upscale restaurants in Jersey. Like it was just kind of all over the place. I was an accompanist for the first 8 months, maybe a year after that. Like on Mondays and Tuesdays, I was in Boston. So I would leave my house at 3 a.m. on Monday morning, go play for 8 hours Monday and Tuesday each, and then drive back.
I think that's called paying dues. That's kind of the term that people use.
Well, I wish the dues paid more.
We all do.
Yeah.
Well, were you doing in New York? Were you doing any teaching or private lessons or?
No. That's a hard scene to get into. Why would you ever want to talk to me when you have, I don't know, Rufus Reed up the street? Yeah. So not really.
Fair enough. Don't sell yourself short. You're a good teacher. Don't sell yourself short. You're a tremendous slouch. All right. So how many years were you in New York?
Oh boy. 4.
Okay. And you were with Winard that whole time. That was kind of one of the main staples of your.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else that you were playing with or groups that you worked with while you were there?
Well, whenever there was a sub in Winard's band that he needed, he always he kind of overfilled the shoes. So Tata couldn't make the gig. He got Stephen Scott, or I don't know, if Randall couldn't make the gig, like Steve Turre did a couple with us. Like he kind of put together like the spotlight of people. So through him, I met a lot of different people. I did a master class with Eric Reed at one point. That went badly. Got to meet and play with Benny Green a couple times. Yeah, that was. Oh man, don't do this. Steve Terrell. Yeah. Trying to think of other people. That was, I'm sure, again, like a million people that I'm forgetting, but
that's all right. Well, so what spurred the decision to leave New York and come to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle?
Whew, this can be a long answer. Okay. So New York got expensive, like New York tends to. And after a while, I started having to make decisions between like car insurance, car, and apartment. I was like, okay, well, got to get to the gig. I choose car and car insurance. And then like everything went fine, living in my car, kind of bouncing around. I did that for like 9.5, 10 months. If you want a really, really great view of New York, live in your car and just wake up in different parking spots and look at water views that you can't afford. And then I had a decision between like car insurance and the car, which of course you choose the car and you just, every time you drive. Where things started to go kind of badly, I was driving back up to Boston for a gig and I had a headlight out. So right at the border of Connecticut and Massachusetts, I got pulled over by a state trooper who quickly ran my plates, and driving a car without insurance is not really an option. So he gave me a choice between serious trouble, like back of the car, going to jail, or I can leave you here and take your car and you can get insurance, get it out. It's like, all right, I choose that one. The nearest rest stop is a mile up the road. So bass and suitcase on the highway, walk up the street. I actually called Max Holmberg, who had to rent a car and showed up at 3 a.m, an hour outside of Boston with the rental car and a pizza. And was like, all right, get in. Wow. Yeah. So we drove back and he bailed me out. And then it happened again 3 months later. I was coming back from a gig on the Cape. There's a town called Provincetown, and it gets out at 1 a.m. I slept there in my car, and I was driving back, and at 6 a.m, blue flashing lights outside of Boston, and the guy again just left me on the road. Got picked up and I whelped the car. Literally just walked away. I was like, well, that was fun.
So for any parents of prospective musicians out there, you're painting kind of a bleak picture here.
100%. People can handle situations better than I did. There are part-time jobs. There are plenty of different ways to not do that.
Well, I was going to ask, you've been in Seattle now for how many years?
Coming up on 6.
Okay. And working a lot. You're gigging a lot. I know because I employ you
Gainfully,
a lot. But comparatively to the scene in New York, do you find any similarities or big differences between like gig pay, between the level of gigs? Your thoughts?
The pay is pretty much identical for like a Vito's gig or even Egan's. There are a lot of clubs that kind of are tiny and pay by the person. The spectrum's a lot deeper. Like the greats are just otherworldly. Not saying that like people here aren't like that, but it's just you can throw a rock and you're more likely to hit one there.
Yeah, there's a larger pool of master musicians living in New York than in Seattle.
And the bads are just as bad. But the spectrum just feels a lot broader, and the depth is like, you're going to find somebody that can play for any gig ever on any night.
Okay. All right. I was just curious. I want to go back to, so now you're in New York again. What help you make the decision to come to the Pacific Northwest? You could have gone back to Chicago. You could have gone anywhere. I mean, why here?
That's true. I woke up in a friend's car that I had borrowed to get to another gig in a Barnes and Noble parking lot in New Jersey. And I had actually just talked to Max. Max is probably the reason why I'm here right now. And we were talking, and he was doing really well and getting his life kind of put together out here. I just kind of asked him point blank, like, is it better? Can I make a living? Can it get worse?
It can always get worse.
Oh, not from where I was. It wasn't getting much worse. And he kind of gave me a rough timeline, said it would take a few months, but like you can put it together out here. So walked in, brushed my teeth, washed my face, got ready in the Barnes and Noble, called my parents and kind of laid out my options. It's like, I can keep doing this. I can keep lying to you. You don't want that. Do you want me to come home, or should I try this out? Like, I'll need a little bit of help, but it sounds like I can make this work. And my parents unconditionally, like without even thinking about it, just said go. So Cole and I flew to LA.
Cole Schuster, who is a classmate of yours from Berklee, who plays guitar. He's a wonderful musician, for people that don't know what the heck you're talking about.
That's right. Sorry. Forget I'm not just talking to you. I flew to LA, and Cole and I flew up to Seattle on the same flight. And Max's parents were gracious enough to let us stay in their extra room. They had a hammock and just enough space for me to sleep underneath Cole, who was in the hammock for the first 4 months, or for the first 2 months. And then that kind of was that. Max just sold us on it, and it's really worked out.
Well, and you guys had a band together, the 200 Trio, which you've got a couple albums out, but you guys you knew each other from school, and you played together at school, and you came on here and you started that band, and you all individually did your own projects, but you also had that group that was working and still, backing up a lot of people. So
yeah, we met through the voice department. I think I remember kind of judging Cole because he showed up with a hollow body to like a pop ensemble. But yeah, we were kind of friends ever since. We used to play together a lot. Max's dorm room was kind of infamous for hosting all sorts of things.
Keep it clean.
Yeah, everybody did. It was fine, but I used to sleep there a lot. Yeah, and then we all moved out here, and it kind of just put itself together.
So it snowballed from there. And so now, currently, I mean, we're all kind of, sheltering in place and not working as much as we're used to working, but we're still finding ways to work. But now you're on the faculty at Western Washington University. Mm-hmm. So you do you still commute up there a couple times a week to teach, or is it all online at this point?
It's all online at this point. I used to do one marathon 12-hour day, but now I'm just online and trying to figure out the best way to do all that.
So you're doing that. You're teaching private lessons, and then you're gigging and composing and doing as much as you can within what we're able to do right now.
Yeah.
So before COVID, what was a regular week? What does that look like for you?
Wake up, practice, play golf, do whatever prep work I had to for lessons, or, if I had to learn arrangements or stuff like that. It was always kind of like pre-gig, post-golf. Like that was my time, and then go play the gig and then go to bed and wake up. If I had to teach, obviously I wasn't playing golf, but wake up, do my marathon day, come home, go to bed. I put let's see, I bought my car in 2016 and I've put like 120,000 miles on it or something like that.
That's about right for a musician.
Yeah. So just driving all the time and playing and practicing and trying to enjoy quality of life out here. Like I've put a premium on that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, comparatively to New York, I mean, it seems like you're doing quite well compared to like the differences. Yeah, you have all those great musicians, mass musicians all the time, but even a lot of them come to town. I mean, you do a lot of sideman work with people that come through that need bassists, you know.
Yeah.
So you're still keeping pretty busy doing a lot of stuff. Is that a fair assumption?
Definitely, yeah. And it's always really cool when friends from New York come out here, get to show them around, get to play, and it's kind of a different. It puts more weight into it. Like it's much better.
Well, we're getting close to that time here. And again, my apologies for starting late. If anybody has any questions for Greg or myself, please feel free to leave a comment and we'll do our best to get to them. Are there any questions at this point? No, not yet. Okay, cool. So, all right. Any projects or things that you've been working on since COVID, like any recordings or remote stuff you've been putting together?
I've done a handful of recordings with people. I don't know if they've gone many places yet. We did a record with Alex Dugdale. I know that's somewhere in the mastering / fundraising for release part. Let's see. I know there's something in the works with Jacqueline Tabor, but I don't know the extent of it. There's some kind of recording that's coming. She has not put that all the way out into the universe. Other than that, kind of just treading water until we get to play. Yeah. People aren't really in the mood to spend $10,000 to make a record from start to finish in times where like no one has any income.
Well, here's kind of switching gears here a little bit. Number one, before I forget, if anyone watching or students, after the fact, see this video, and if anyone wants to get in touch with you for recording or to take lessons or for a gig, how can they get in touch with you?
Greg Feingold Bass is the Google search. My name, email, and phone number are all just plastered on the internet past that. I've never had a website or a business card.
We're working on it.
I mean, I haven't needed one. I don't know. It's an odd source of pride for some reason. I don't know. I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook. Like it's just the normal avenues. Greg Feingold at Gmail.
Right. Shoot, I had a question for you I was going to ask and I completely just lost it. It was switching gears. No, that's what it was. So a lot of clubs over this last year that have been around for a long time have closed here in the Northwest, in the Seattle area, Pacific Northwest. And you have a lot of friends on the East Coast as well. They're still living and playing. And I know that a lot of clubs are struggling, particularly right now because of COVID-19. But before that, like before COVID-19 happened, like we recently lost Tula's here in the Northwest, which have been around for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
I can remember all the clubs that were around when I was growing up have come and gone. I mean, club comes, it's around for a while, then it goes. And some of them are around for a long time. So in Chicago or New York, prior to COVID-19, were a lot of the clubs that you grew up playing in still around, or have they kind of gone away?
A lot of them are. Most of the ones that I spent a lot of time playing in are still around. Jason and I still talk about Tula's like every time I talk to him.
So for those who don't, Jason was the manager at Tula's for years and
now owns a great restaurant.
The
biggest blow I can think of off the top of my head is the Jazz Standard, which was an awesome venue, and the restaurant was great. It was in an awesome location. COVID hit and it would have been impossible to pay that rent. I can't imagine trying to figure that out. Tula's was a big blow. The Pacific Room was sad. Like that could have been such a great space. And then
what about in Chicago?
I haven't kept in touch with a lot of people that are still in Chicago. Like everybody that I used to play with is kind of either in New York or not really playing a ton anymore. So I couldn't tell you.
All right, we're getting close to that time here. Any questions? No questions. All right. Any plans for? It seems things are starting to relax. No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Things are still rough out there. But I'm getting more calls for like things like 5, 6, 7 months out, different projects and things, gigs or private affairs, things like that. Are you the same? Are you starting things kind of loosening up a little bit, or still kind of pretty close to the vest?
They're still pretty close. January is a better month than December was, than is November. Like it, one by one, I would say. Like it's a gig or two that are coming back now slowly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like a trickle, and it's for like 5, 6, 7 months out. People are kind of gambling on, things being a little bit more open.
I would imagine that with outdoor things being an option again, like as the weather gets nicer, I'm sure stuff will come about even with the current rules that we have now. But until, it's not snowing or 35 degrees outside, like it's going to be tough.
Well, what I like to ask all the guests that come on here is, here you are, Greg Feingold in 2020, and you've had a pretty long career so far, playing with lots of different great musicians of a very high caliber. If you were going to give advice to people that were thinking about becoming musicians, what would that be, beyond owning your car and having insurance? Bam! Sorry.
Oh no,
what do you got?
You're not the first person, including my parents, to make that joke. Like one size fits all up and coming musician advice.
Things that, and I always tell people this, like I can remember vividly like certain moments that I've had with certain instructors that have been like light bulbs that are like epiphanies that really help me. So I'm curious if you've had experiences like that or things to share.
Go the extra mile. If you show up on time and you've worked as hard as you can for as long as you can on the things that matter in music, like time, groove, if you're a genuinely nice person, like just putting humanity on the same plane as musicianship and packaging it in a decent way, like it kind of all comes together eventually. You just have to trust it. So work as hard as you can for as long as you have the will to, I guess is what I would say.
All right. Well, that's a good place to leave it. So any questions? No. All right. We're going to wrap up here. So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Again, we do this every single week. And you can find the broadcasts, old broadcasts on both the Facebook page that's on the post here. And also they're all up on YouTube as well. If you look up the Kareem Candy World Orchestra, you can find the stuff there. And now we're also going to be streaming to Twitch. So I'm 42. I have no idea what the hell we're doing, but we're doing it, by God. If you enjoy this stuff, if it's a value to you, feel free to make a donation. You can do that via Venmo or PayPal or send a check. But yeah, like I said, we do this every single week, both interviews and performances. So we hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, Greg, for being our guest. And we'll be back in about an hour for the actual concert at the same links here. So stay tuned. Thank you.